are working now on a director's cut version of The Tree Man. There was a few things that we didn't squeeze into the original version, such as sea level. We didn't have any footage or discussion about sea level, so we have that now. We found a very early, my first live performance with the Allman Brothers band when Barry Oakley was still
Yeah.
alive. So we got a little clip of that, and we're working on a couple of other, hopefully, possibilities. George Harrison, trying to get some permission to use some clips from his tour of Japan that I was on. And what else? A little clip about Dr. John, my time with Dr. John. So we'll see. Maybe another 15, 20 minutes added to the original.
I'm here today with a very special guest, my good friend and your favorite piano player, Chuck Leavell. Chuck, welcome aboard. Good to see you as always.
Same here, Alan. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And where are you calling in from? You're home at Charlene?
I'm at home. I just returned a couple of days ago from a week-long shoot for my TV program, America's Forest. That went very well. This will be our 14th episode. Um, we've been doing it more or less state by state, so this will be the second episode for the state of Georgia.
Wow. And where can one watch these great shows?
It runs on PBS. PBS is a strange animal. You know, if you're Ken Burns or Rick Steves, you get every PBS station in the world. If you're Chuck, you send the information out to all the PBS stations and they choose to run it or not run it. We've been very successful. I think 70% of PBS stations have run it, but it all runs at whatever time they designate. That said, we are also streamable on Amazon.com, America's Forest with Chuck Leavell.
Okay, great. And I was going to get to this. The Tree Man, great documentary about you. And to clarify for anyone who hasn't seen it, if you're watching this, you definitely should watch that. And of course, it covers Chuck's really fascinating career, second life as one of the great foresters of America, one of the great spokespeople for trees. But it also is a documentary about your musical career. So, covers both. If you're just a music fan, you'll enjoy it too, and you'll come out knowing more and being more of a tree fan as well. So I feel really comfortable promoting that one. It's a great piece of work. I watched it with my father, and I loved every aspect of it. My father is an amateur tree lover, and he got so excited. If you remember, he jumped in my car when I was on my way to see you because after he saw the tree aspect, he was excited to meet you. So,
Very cool. Well, I appreciate that. We just a little tidbit of info. We are working now on a director's cut version of The Tree Man. There was a few things that we didn't squeeze into the original version, such as sea level. We didn't have any footage or discussion about sea level, so we have that now. We found a very early, my first live performance with the Allman Brothers band when Barry Oakley was still
yeah.
alive. So we got a little clip of that, and we're working on a couple of other, hopefully, possibilities. George Harrison, trying to get some permission to use some clips from his tour of Japan that I was on. And what else? A little clip about Dr. John, my time with Dr. John. So we'll see. Maybe another 15, 20 minutes added to the original.
That's great. Yeah. So Sea Level, what a great band. And I think as time has gone on, since the original albums are 50 years old now, more or less, and we're getting there. But that's so it's truly past the test of time. The music sounds great now, and that really began with you, Lamar, and JMO just finding yourself alone and jamming a lot, right?
Absolutely correct. Yes. It's really JMO's suggestion. He kind of recruited Lamar and I to come to his house back in the early days of when we joined the Allman Brothers. And he had a great setup in his house to play, had some keyboards and drums and bass, all kinds of amps and whatnot. And he encouraged us to listen to a lot of jazz that I was personally not all that familiar with at the time, a little bit, but he got us listening to everything from Miles Davis to Coltrane to Cannonball Adderley to Chick Corea to just all of it. And so we started as a trio that JMO named us We Three. We never really played publicly. We did once when I think it was New Haven, Connecticut, maybe. This was on an Allman Brothers show when Dickie and Greg were both terribly late to the concert venue, and the crowd was getting upset, and the roadies came to me and to us and said, "Listen, they're starting to throw things. Can you guys go out and do something?" So the three of us went out and played just a couple of little jams to try to smooth out the crowd. But other than that, we didn't really play publicly. We played for ourselves at JMO's house. We played a couple of times at the Capricorn picnic and summer games. And that was about it. And then when the brothers broke up, at least temporarily in '76, the three of us kind of looked at each other and said, well, let's see if we can make something out of this. And I recruited my old friend Jimmy Knowles, as you know, Alan. Yep. And Jimmy came in, made us a quartet, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, boy, what an opening first show. People are throwing stuff, stomping for the Allman Brothers, and go do something, boys. Go out and tap dance.
Help.
And and one of the great things about it, especially at that time, was the opportunity to hear JMO playing just by himself, because it was hard for all but the most astute drum-oriented Allman Brothers fans to pick out, what was Butch and what was JMO and really what JMO did. And I think that Sea Level immediately shined a light on who he was as a musician. And then it was easier to go back retroactively, listen to the Allman Brothers stuff and say, oh, that's JMO, that's JMO, that's JMO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was fun working with Just Jay. And I think he really enjoyed that as well. And, it did help the fans to distinct between Jay and Butch to a large degree. And then, as you know, Alan, as time went on, the personnel of Sea Level did change. We had George Weaver on drums. George used to play with Otis Redding, and he was a great R&B drummer. Joe English came in later and played drums with us. Lamar eventually left, and we had another bass player for a little time. And, of course, we added Randall Bramlett and Davis Causey to the mix along the way. So the personnel did change, but we had 5 records in 5 years. 4 records on Capricorn and 1 on Arista.
Yeah. Well, and then the live album of the Allman Brothers that has the biggest corollary to that was Wipe the Windows, Change the Oil. And one thing I'm proud about with my book, Brothers and Sisters, is I think I helped a lot of people go back to that. I know I have, because people have told me. And that really started in part with the conversation with JMO, because he was giving drum lessons to just a friend's kid who was coming over, and he was showing him some stuff, and the kid brought over a copy of Wipe the Windows, and JMO hadn't listened to it in years, and he said, "Why'd you bring that?" And he said, "Because I've been listening to it and it's really good. I want to learn some of this stuff." And that got JMO to listen to it, and he thought, wow, we were really good. And that highlights you were in the band during this time where there was such a high level of musicianship. And yet the core members in some ways were still shell-shocked from these deaths and were chasing something they couldn't get. And so I don't think they fully appreciated what you guys were doing until after.
Yeah, I recall JMO calling me around that period of time and saying, "Hey man, I've been listening to this live record. Have you listened to it?" I said, "Jay, I hadn't listened to that thing probably since it came out, And he said, "Well, go back and listen to it, because there's some really hot stuff in there." And he was right. Because there had been the iconic version of Live at Fillmore East, and, it definitely overshadowed the live version that we had when I was in the band and when Lamar was in the band. But, in retrospect, there's a lot of good music there. Versions of Elizabeth Reed and other songs that we used to play live.
Elizabeth Reed with you and Chuck is completely different. It's a different song. I mean, I'm sorry, you and Lamar is a completely different song. And a great, the song itself, of course, is still great. And the turn that you guys give it is really different and really, terrific.
Yeah, well, it stands. I think it stands on its own. You know, it was a good live record, and you know, people occasionally come up to me and talk about that record, so it's nice to hear that.
So we're really here today to talk about your work with Tommy Talton on Seven Levels, his last album released posthumously. Tommy was for those I'm not talking to you because I know you know this, but for those listening, Tommy was a great guy, obviously a great guitarist, singer, songwriter, as evidenced by his work with Cowboy, his solo stuff over the years, his work with the Greg Allman tour. And I got to know him. I've known him for many years, but I got to know him really well in writing Brothers and Sisters because I did that chapter on Laid Back, and he was, of course, an essential part of it, as were you, and that's what brought you into that whole orbit thing, thankfully. But you know, Tommy was such a great source of information, and then he's one of those guys we ended up talking for hours and hours and hours when we, you know, just to do a little interview. And I'm so glad that you all got together to make this album, as he hadn't done anything in a while, and he knew he was ill. When you all got together, did was everyone aware like this is probably that Tommy's health was not great and that this was probably a swan song?
Yes, we were all aware of it. We didn't know for sure because Tommy was very optimistic, and he was also very kind of exacting in his doctor's visits. You know, he would know exactly what the doctor was talking about, and he was very hopeful that he was going to overcome this. And we all, of course, wanted him to. But I think probably in the back of our minds, we were all thinking, you know, sorry, this is probably going to be the end of it, you know. And the idea was to bring back all the personnel that we had worked together with Greg and with Cowboy, you know. So we had Randall Bramlett, and we had Bill Stewart on drums and Charlie Hayward on bass, and it was the old team, you know. And it was very sweet for all of us to be in the same room together again.
Yeah, and Rick Hirsch from Wet Willie took really a lead role and co-produced it, and I think really put in yeoman's effort to mix it and get it done after Tommy's passing. Yeah, I was going to ask you that. It must have been emotional for you all to be together in the same studio, no less, where you had worked together on Laid Back and on so many other things.
Well, it was, you know, Capricorn, as you know, was revived, Studios, that is. Capricorn Studios was revived about 5 years ago now. And so that it was a no-brainer to say, let's do it there, you know, where we had all worked in previously. And it was a lot of fun, you know, there was a lot of camaraderie and memories being shared and that sort of thing. And, you know, Tommy is a very unique songwriter. His songs are, you know, a little bit off the normal, sort of, so to speak. They're unusual um, and very interesting. You know, the changes are not 1-4-5 changes. You know, and so we were all excited to work on it. I don't think I played on everything on the seven levels. I maybe have done. I can't remember. You would know better than me, Alan, but maybe 4 or 5 out of the seven that's on the record.
Well, of
You know,
course,
Tommy.
I'm sorry. No, Randall's also a great piano player. So I wasn't, you know, it's not always clear which of you is playing it. There's a lot of electric piano. Is that mostly you or Randall?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you know, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that I haven't really gone back and listened. I listened to that wonderful song they've put out as a single, I Want to Do It All Over Again, which is a really great piece of work, I thought. And especially, I guess Rick brought in some strings on the recording, and it just made a beautiful recording, and that was very Tommy, you know, the thought of, hey, here I am at this phase of life. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be here, but I'd love to do it all over again, you know, and it's a beautiful sentiment. I was not on that one, so if there's keys, that would be Randall, I imagine. But you mentioned Rick, and I'd like to echo that because Rick did a superb job of bringing the bull by the horns and directing traffic and working with Tommy and making Tommy comfortable, and then, of course, doing the mixing and making the final outcome. So hats off to Rick.
Yeah. When you first, you mentioned earlier that the Tree Man was going to have some new clips of you playing with Dr. John. Um, that was one of the first. It was Dr. John and Alex Taylor were the two first big gigs you got to get you onto the Capricorn circuit world, correct?
Yes.
And what did you learn from each of those guys? I mean, Dr. John, my goodness, with him you were primarily playing Hammond B3, so he could play piano. Is that correct?
Yeah, he used to call me that little organ player, Chucky. It was a great opportunity to work with and watch a master at work. And it was not a long stint. I think it was maybe close to 7 months together, but we were traveling, we were touring. We opened up a lot for Ike and Tina Turner, I remember. And Mack he was so fantastic, not just musically, but, we were all riding in a station wagon together. And if he saw an antique store or some kind of interesting side store somewhere along the way, hey, Glenn was our road manager. And hey, Glenn, pull over here, man. I want to see what they got in here. And he'd go in and he'd find bells or trinkets or clothing or something that he thought would fit the bill, percussion instruments, anything. And we'd spend, an hour or so browsing around the antique store or whatever it was. And it was a life experience for me to work with him.
Yeah. And how much of a difference was there between Mack and Dr. John?
To my notion, not a whole lot. I mean, Dr. John is a persona, whether on record or live or was, but he was pretty much the same, off the stage. To me, at least, he was, more personable. We got to be friends, and after we ended our stint with him, and I joined the Allman Brothers band, he opened up a couple of times for us, and he made it a point, God bless him, to stick around for the whole show and watch me play. And at one point, I don't know if you remember the piano mute, Alan, but I used to listen to some jazz players that sometimes would put their hands on the strings of the piano and played, creating a plucking sound. And I started doing that in some of our long, indulgent solos with the Allmans. And Twiggs Linden saw me doing that, and he said, well, if you do that, you can't use both your hands. Let me make you something. He made the piano mute, which involved these levers that would come down, controlled by a hydraulic pedal, and they would mute all the strings and allow me to do that with both hands. And so on this particular show, I had done a solo using the mute, and Mack loved that. He was like, man, that mute, man, I never seen nothing like that. That was something, brother, man, that was cool. And so, we had this wonderful friendship. And at the end of that night in his hotel room, at the end of that show where he had opened up and we had played with the Allman Brothers, he said, hey, Chucky, I got something for you. And he went over and kind of got his suitcase and fumbled around a little bit, got an envelope and handed it to me. And he said, man, there's some little good luck things in here. And don't ever let nobody see it, but you just kind of keep it as close to you as you can. And I got a leather pouch for it, and I still have that, of course, and it has been my good luck charm for sure.
That's amazing. You do a great imitation too. How am I just discovering that you're skilled at impersonations? And Mack was an interesting character in my career just because he knew Dwayne quite well. He knew Stevie Ray Vaughan quite well, and I interviewed him. He and Reese Winans are some of the only people who appear in both my books about the Allman Brothers and about Stevie Ray Vaughan with interesting parallels. And then, of course, you got to play with Reese in the Brothers.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy those shows where you just play piano? I mean, aside from the bigger picture, but just in terms of playing piano and having someone else play organ, is that?
Yeah, well, that harkened back to my days with the Allmans when Greg was playing organ and I was playing piano, and And Reese is such a masterful player, and his work with Joe Bonamassa and his work is, with Stevie Ray, stand tall. I mean, he's just a masterful B3 player as well as a great piano player too. I mean, it was like leave the egos at the door. Let's get together and let's play. And that's what it was. It was fantastic. Everybody got along famously. It was fun, enjoyable. I mean, if I had any regrets about it, I appreciated being a special guest. I mean, that was like a place of honor, and I appreciated that, but I wish I could have played the whole set. But I understand, there was a lot of history when I was not in the Allman Brothers band with Warren and other configurations of the ABB. So I understood the idea, and I guess in the long run it really worked out really well. But I was a little jealous sometimes hearing some of those songs that I wish I could have played on live with the brothers. And we'll see. There's talk about trying to do it again, and maybe a few times. I don't know, but scheduling is a big challenge, as you know, with Derek and Susan out working, and Warren with the Mule and his own band, and it's just, and Reese with Bonamassa, but we've talked about it, and I think we all want to do it. It's a matter of logistics, I think.
There were only a couple of songs that you guys played on both nights in this last 2-night run, and one of them, of course, was Jessica, which and great both nights. But on the second night, you played some stuff I'd never heard you do before, and I felt like Oteil and Joe Russo, who was right behind you, both have sort of some jazz backgrounds. They were kind of egging you on and poking and prodding you in that direction, maybe. But it was great, and you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do, and it's hard for me not to do the solo that I did on the record, because they seem to adhere to that solo, and so I like to keep at least elements of that going every time I play the song. But on this occasion, we were all, I think, very loose and feeling good. And I said, you know what, let me go off a little bit. I didn't have anything in mind. I just said, just do something different, Chuck, And it was fun to see some expressions on the stage.
I was watching Oteil right behind you, and he was looking at Derek and Warren, and there was something happening there. And but the thing is, and one of the coolest moments of the night, and I talked about this with Warren, who brought it up to me actually, was after you did that whole improvisation, and then you brought it right back to the recorded solo, and when you hit back on the familiar melody, and the place exploded. I mean, every single, and it's because your solo on Jessica is like the guitar solo on Hotel California. There's a handful of these solos which are in people's brains, and they hear, and that's what you're talking about, why you want to play it, because it's one of those few things that feels wrong if it's not right. But
it's familiar territory, it's familiar territory.
But it's more than familiar. It's like part of our DNA. It's like familiar, like your nose is familiar. I mean,
well, it's a lot of fun to play it, and I, still enjoy it 50 odd years later. So,
you mentioned George Harrison, some possibility of having some clips from the tour of Japan. And that's great. That's sort of a little forgotten moment in your career, and probably and in general. I mean, that great tour of, was it only Japan with George Harrison? It was basically the Eric Clapton band being George's band, correct?
Exactly. And if you recall, this was after the tragedy of Eric losing his son. Eric was going to take a year off and spend with his son Connor. And, I was a little disappointed at that, because I had just worked with Eric and I was having such a great time working with him. But I understood that, and everybody did, and everybody appreciated it. And then the tragedy occurred, and the phone call came from his management saying, look, Eric doesn't need to take a year off. He needs to work, And he's been talking to George, and as we all know, they had this amazing relationship. And so Eric pretty much challenged George saying to, in effect, hey man, you make a record every 5, 6 years and you never get out in the trenches with the rest of us on tour. You never, go in front of the public. And so he laid the gauntlet down to George, and George, I think, had no choice but to accept, but he only would accept if it would be Eric and the band. Because George was like, I don't have a band. I don't have a band. And Eric said, well, I've got a band and you can have it and you can have me. And so that was an amazing, wonderful experience for all of us. Of course, Greg Fillinganes was in the band, Steve Ferroni, Nathan East, Tessa and Katie, the singers, Ray Cooper. It was a fabulous band. And George was really appreciative of it. And we worked so hard to do it justice. And I think we did. It was a wonderful tour. And the experience along the way was special. George was such a humble guy and such a easy person to be with. He would call me or us, the band members, after a show and say, would you like to come out and hang a bit, And he was just so accommodating and sweet and funny, witty, had a wonderful little chuckle that you could hear kind of under his breath a little bit when something interesting or fun would happen. And it was just magical. It was just so magical playing with him. And thankfully, we did have that one record, the Live in Japan record. So it stands the test of time, I think.
Yeah, and another sort of forgotten gig for you that just resurfaced recently was with David Gilmour, because they put out a great live recording with him. How long did you play with Gilmour, and how much fun was that?
Oh, it was fantastic. The call, well, actually, it was the contact was made on the guest book of my website. Rose Lane was checking it at one point, and she said, Chuck, there's a guy that claims he's David Gilmour. And the message read, hi, Chuck, David Gilmour here, ... honest. I had done a show with David way back in, it was called Guitar Greats. You may recall that.
Oh, yeah, great, wildest show ever with Lita
Yeah.
Ford and Tony Iommi and Dickie and Brian Setzer and Johnny Winter. John Scherer's the only one who could have pulled that one up. Yeah,
John
amazing.
Scherer was the one.
And David Gilmour, yeah, he was, wow, what a wild, cool show.
So, I on the message he left a phone number and an email, and I wasn't sure if it was really him. So I said, well, I don't know, the email sounds safer somehow. So I emailed him, and he immediately got right back to me and invited me to do the tour. And this was in 2016. And I said, David, we haven't played together except for that show. And there was one other time I think we were rehearsing for George Harrison in London, and David came around and invited some of us to his house, and we went there and had, fun for a little while. But that was it, And so I said, do you want me to come hang with you or play a little bit? Are you sure you want me on this thing? He said, no, I want you on it. No problem, man. If you're available, come on. So that was very heartening and encouraging. And so we went through all the rehearsals, and we got to the last song, which was Comfortably Numb. And David said, Chuck, would you like to sing on this? And my first reaction was, I thought he meant on the chorus or some harmony or something. And I said, sure, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to do the counter, the counter vocal, the doctor, so to speak, character. And wow, what an opportunity, right? So, and he gave me a good piece of advice. He said, when you make your delivery, curl your lip a little bit, meaning sing it with some attitude.
Yeah.
And, that helped me create what I hope was a good position.
Another one of the truly iconic solos, from him on that, of course.
Yeah.
And you have the Rolling Stones logo over your right shoulder, and of course you've been with them for 40 years now, 30,
43.
43 years. Amazing. So you are, in your own way, English rock royalty. All these years with the Stones, David Gilmour, George Harrison, Eric Clapton. Pretty good for a guy from Alabama, huh?
Well, it's interesting because I think all of those characters revere music from the South. And I think that's one reason I got the gig with the Stones in the first place. Ian Stewart, as you know, was a confidant of the band, a great piano player. And he was my first initial contact with the band. And he was fascinated with, New Orleans players, blues players from all throughout the South, as were all the band members. And that goes across the board to all these English players and artists. They have a real reverence from all different kinds of music from the South. And I think it helped me to get those positions.
Yeah. Well, and to bring it back to Tommy Talton, Seven Levels is a return of, Southern rock royalty. And it doesn't necessarily mean capital S, capital R, but rock royalty of Southern gentlemen. And the guys together, contribute to Wet Willie and the Allman Brothers and Cowboy and Charlie Daniels Band and of course Greg Allman Band and so much more. So it's great to hear and recorded right back at home at Capricorn, which is great. And the resurgence of Capricorn must make you happy that's this is.
Yeah, amen. I mean, for a number of years, I maintained a studio here in the country where I live. And, after fooling with it a while, there was a couple of things. One was I'm not a good engineer and I don't really like engineering. So, I didn't really get off on pulling the buttons and such in my home studio. And the other thing was I'm out here all by myself, man, I could invite some people, but it was rare to have anybody available to come way out here and hang and play. And so I gave the studio up, and when Capricorn Studios was revived, it was like manna from heaven, man. A familiar place. I had worked and made some pretty good records, and the room looked exactly the same, except with the new technology being incorporated. It was familiar and comfortable and wonderful. And of course, I was able to be musical director on the Capricorn Revival show, which was a very, very special show. I wish that had been recorded.
Yeah.
I mean, man, we had Jimmy Hall and Marcus King and my goodness, Tommy and Dwayne Betts, and such a great lineup of folks playing. And everybody had the vibe on that show. And I think it was also because of the history of the studio and the history of all the music that was made in the studio. So getting to Tommy, that was the appropriate place for all of us to get together and do that for Tommy. And I'm glad we did. I really am. It was, as you said earlier, his swan song, and a very fitting and very impressive swan song.
Yeah. Amen. And we can wrap it up there because I know you got to go, but I'm not going to let you say you made some pretty good records at Capricorn. I mean, I know you're a humble guy and like understatement, but you did more than pretty good records at Capricorn. I'm sure you did make some pretty good records at Capricorn. You also made some all-time classic rock pantheon albums at Capricorn. So,
well, kind of you to say, Alan, and thank you. So much appreciate your work, the books that you've written about the history of the music and the Allmans in particular, and thank you for all of that. For giving that to the people, to giving the stories and the history to the people, and the people obviously love it because the books have done very well for you.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate that. Thank you for thanking me. All
right,
the best.
pal.
I look forward to seeing you in person again soon.
All right. All the best. Thank you, Alan.
Chuck.